What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the Country Roads webcast here for our pre-spring roster update here, March 24th edition. And this, of course, coming after West Virginia officially announced the addition of the Northwestern transfer defensive backs that we have reported on previously here on the channel when they first committed to the Mountaineers. In our latest transfer portal update, we were waiting on the official announcement from the university. Knew it was going to come before spring. They were expected to be here for, spring football practice, and they have indeed made it to campus. So that's kind of the impetus for this roster update. But also, you may know, you may not know, but West Virginia reports tomorrow for the start of spring football practice. So because of that, Neil Brown met with the media a few days ago, and he provided us with some other updates roster-wise. So I, threw those in here on our roster tracker on the CRW. So let's dive in here. Let's take a look at the updated roster here as far as scholarship players are concerned as West Virginia gets set to head into spring practice here in just a couple of days. Let's take a look at these scholarship players that will be on the roster here on campus for the spring. All right, I'm not going to highlight everything here. I'll kind of just slowly scroll through so you can take a look. Obviously, the eligibility years have been updated a year, of course, now heading into the 2024 season. I'm just going to try and highlight the changes since our last roster update here on the Country Roads webcast. But if you want, you can check out the playlist to, go back and find out some more information about some of the stuff that you may have not have known about that happened throughout the off season. We've been updating it here on the channel, so check out the playlist. I'll try and put a card for it here in the video. But as we scroll through, no big changes really offensively, save for, some of the additions of transfers that you may not have seen previously. The main one being Xavier Bosley there coming to the offensive line where he's expected to battle for the right tackle spot with Nick Malone. Either way, he's going to end up getting a ton of playing time. Both of those guys are going to be crucial parts to West Virginia's offensive line this year, which hopefully, fingers crossed, will be just as good as it was last season, despite losing Zach Frazier. Still a ton of talent returning on that offensive line. But as we flip over to the defense, this is where we get into, some of the changes, some of the new faces that have arrived. Obviously, the two Northwestern defensive backs, we'll talk about those momentarily. But Neil Brown also talked a little bit about some of the newcomers and the positions that they're going to be playing in the spring. As I already had it previously, TJ Jackson is going to be a defensive end for the Mountaineers. Elijah Kinsler, a freshman that enrolled early, is going to be playing defensive tackle. That was one of the updates that Neil Brown shared at his press conference, as well as the fact that Nate Gabriel, another incoming freshman, is going to be playing the nose tackle position. So you see him reflected here. West Virginia has some good bodies there at the nose. Neil Brown specifically mentioned Corey McIntyre Jr., that he's excited to see him this spring. I think they have a lot of high hopes for him. And we saw, Fortorma Mulba pop up on the PFF grades near the top of the list a ton last season. The bandit position, obviously, Ty French is the newcomer there. We saw Tyron Bradley have a great bowl game. Neil Brown mentioned that as well. And the newcomer, a four-star recruit that was, a big impact, I think, in this class and has a high ceiling and is going to be a good pass rusher of the future, I think, is Abinan Wuka, as kind of expected. He is playing the bandit position, but something that stuck out to me in Neil Brown's press conferences when he was talking about the bandit position, we know that West Virginia is switching defenses to more of a 3-4 scheme this year, and maybe some of the position names are going to change a little bit too because of that, because every time he talked about the bandit, he was also calling it the spur. So maybe they're going to call it the spur more now in their new defensive system, or maybe it's interchangeable names depending on which, sub package that they're using on defense at any given time. But I thought that was an interesting little tidbit that he pointed out. And, he did go into a little bit of a breakdown of the coaches and how that's going to function. Jordan Leslie essentially won't have a position coach now. He'll kind of just be the defensive coordinator that can hop from room to room. He wants him to be more involved with every position group. So that's kind of why they're doing things the way that they are. And, he did address Shadon Brown coaching the entire secondary, which will be corners and safeties. I know there's been some questioning of that decision to have one, person coach, both units, because, that's 2 corners, 3 safeties. So I think that Neil Brown tried to alleviate some concerns there by saying, some of the grad assistants will help. So, look out for Javon Codlin. Jay Codd will probably be coaching the corners a lot in position drills at practice. But nonetheless, continuing to update our roster here. Moving to the linebacker position, Neil Brown did confirm where some of these guys will be playing. Reed Carrico will be playing the Mike linebacker position for West Virginia. We know that he's expected to be involved this year. Trey Lathan's going to be full go for the spring, ready to, attack again like he was last season early on. Seemed to be well on his way to a potential freshman All-American season. I'm excited for him this year. Get Ben Cutter in his second year, and Josiah Trotter as well is ready to go this spring after the injury he suffered last spring. Get our first look at him. The coaches were really high on him. So I think West Virginia's linebacking core is in good shape. The defensive depth in general is in good shape. And now is where we get into what we really want to talk about here. Let's go ahead. Let's highlight, the 2 new additions. Garnet Hollis Jr. coming from Northwestern. He's going to be playing the cornerback position. and then the other was Jaheim Joseph coming from Northwestern. And when I talked about both these guys coming initially, I spoke about, Jaheim Joseph. I said, he could fit as a spear or a free safety. Typically played free safety, but he does, have enough of a skill set and lined up in different positions enough that he could play the spear at West Virginia. And Neil Brown pretty much mentioned they're going to cross train a lot of these guys. But I also mentioned in our last, update or last live stream that I wouldn't be surprised to see Aubrey Burks move and play a little spear this season. He did that in the bowl game some, and kind of seems like that's the intention at first. This spring seems like it's going to be a bit of a trial and error to see where these pieces are going to fit, because West Virginia actually has the luxury for the first time in a long time to have a ton of depth in the defensive secondary to where they can kind of mix and match these pieces around to see what fits best where to get their best 11 players on the field at any given moment and have their best, possible sub packages as well. But it sounds like Aubrey Burks will get some looks at the spear. Of course, he'll still be playing, some deep safety as well when they need him to. Raleigh Collins will stay at spear. An incoming true freshman that enrolled early, Zay Jennings, going to get some looks at the spear position as well. And then when we talk about the cornerbacks, we talked about Garnet Hollis. He's the transfer in from Northwestern. He's going to primarily play corner. I'd say he has a good chance to end up as West Virginia's one of the two starters there at the cornerback position. Neil Brown mentioned Montre Miller, the transfer in from Kent State last season that I was, so high on. I kept, throwing out that stat last year, over 800 snaps at the collegiate level, never committed a pass interference penalty. He was very good at Kent State. I was really high on him coming into last year. Hated that he suffered that injury. We didn't get to see him, but the bright side of that was he was able to, grab a waiver, and he will be back for the Mountaineers this year. So the cornerback position, West Virginia will have, a lot of guys competing for these two spots. Another one, Aiden Garnes, a transfer in from Duquesne. We've talked about him in the past. Neil Brown mentioned he'll be cross-training. He may play some deep safety for the Mountaineers as well and see if he fits that better and he can get onto the field quicker that way. We know Jacoby Spells was a highly regarded incoming recruit when he came into West Virginia, so a lot of potential still there for him. He's going to be battling. And then TJ Crandall, the transfer in from Colorado State that had probably the most impressive offer list of any defensive back transfer that West Virginia was able to pick up, and he has a really high ceiling and is still young, going to be here for multiple years. He'll be competing as well. Then you got redshirt freshman Jordan Jackson, one of the Jackson twins, that's involved in the defensive backfield for West Virginia. Then moving back to the safeties, I mentioned Jaheim Joseph coming in from Northwestern. He's going to cross-train a little bit, but I think he'll get a look first here at the free safety position here in the spring. Israel Boyce, a true freshman coming in for the Mountaineers, is also going to be playing safety. I was wondered if he was playing corner or safety, but according to Neil Brown, he's going to start off at safety. And then, of course, cat safety, we have Anthony Wilson returning for his final collegiate season here. Then you have the other Jackson twin, Josiah Jackson, and Aiden Nelson as well. He played some basketball this year, but we bounced him back to the football side. Specialists remain the same. Michael Hayes at kicker, Oliver Straw at punter, Austin Brinkman still, great long snapper for the Mountaineers. But I think the interesting pieces to watch is kind of how all of these new faces will fit into this defense. West Virginia has a lot of depth. They're breaking in a new 3-4 scheme, but it'll be interesting to see who ends up where, who ends up playing, spear predominantly, who ends up being the deep safeties, and how do you, have all of these good names. You got 5 solid names here to kind of create a 2 deep at corner. So it's a good problem to have to see who ends up being the 2 starters, who ends up being the backups, and then maybe kind of the 5th one out there ends up floating around a little bit, playing some spear, playing some deep safety, and some of these sub packages for the Mountaineers. So it's a good problem to have. And same goes for linebacker to see how these end up factoring out. Who plays, the first top 2 at Mike, Ben Cutter and Reed Carrico, Tyreek Austin Cave, all going to be battling there, but don't rule out Caden Bizer. And then you're going to have your outside linebackers as well, which will kind of function differently this year. Obviously, the wheel linebacker will still remain, there with Trey Lathan and Josiah Trotter probably manning that position. But then don't forget the bandit that I talked about earlier, kind of changing a little bit this year. And Neil Brown even referred to it by a different name of the spur position. So that's a look at the roster and kind of a brief little rundown. I probably was a little bit long-winded somewhat, but wanted to kind of give you guys a good rundown of this roster and what we could see in the spring and how some of this could shake out. But as we get further into the spring, I'm sure we'll have more roster updates, but they will really start transitioning into more depth chart updates here in the near future once we see where each of these players will break down position-wise. You see, even the wide receivers right now, I just have them all grouped together. Soon we'll be able to, group them in between the X, the Y, and the Z, see who's playing inside, who's playing outside predominantly, and do the same thing with our linebackers, corners, and safeties here in the near future. So be sure to stay tuned in here to the Country Roads webcast, especially now that spring football is about to start. We're going to have, a live live stream a week, and plenty more roster update videos and news update videos in regards to this West Virginia football team and this highly anticipated 2024 season. So appreciate you not only tuning into this video, but if you did make it this far in the video, hit that thumbs up button. It helps a ton with that YouTube algorithm, helps us push this video out to more people, helps it reach more Mountaineer Nation. And another way that you can help us reach more Mountaineer Nation is just by hitting that subscribe button. That really helps us a ton here on the Country Roads webcast as well. What are your thoughts on the West Virginia roster in its current state? Be sure to share those in the comments below. Appreciate those interactions as they really help us to try and grow the channel here as well. Having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.